Hi guys, Michelle here at OG Rose. I am so excited and so honored to be speaking with Shari and Megan or Seeking Genuine. And it's just a delight to know both of these women and get to collaborate and see how our ideas bring about and conjure forth further insights and further explorations together. And so we're going to be doing that today about a myriad of topics, but we're sort of going to be circling some themes related to the stories that we tell ourselves, the connection between surviving and thriving, and also energy preservation and what you can learn from the land or tending to animals and how that relates to what we can take away as a lesson for us as humans. So that's kind of the framing of what I want to start with. But yeah, I'll just throw it to whoever wants to take that and run with it. I'll just say one more thing really quickly is that I have in the past thought a lot about the fact that sometimes today we forget about our most like our maybe our most base survival needs and skills, and so therefore we don't know how to understand thriving, because then without if you don't have to rely on that and think about it much, and you sort of take it for granted that you'll survive, then that seems to somehow make your thriving not as meaningful or something, or like not as earned or not as like it's not in touch with your own agency. So then people seem to thrive, but then they're like depressed and they don't know, like they've got pretty much everything they need, but they don't know like why they're living or why they should keep living. And it can be quite a lot of very grim situation can be. But anyways, so I've always been interested in the connection between surviving and thriving. And but on the other hand, if you're just in survival mode, obviously that's a term that gets thrown around a lot today. And I understand it, right? But I almost feel like maybe it could be sublated, because otherwise you kind of get stuck in the survival. You know, you think of yourself in survival mode, which is like kind of hilarious because we live with grocery stores and air conditioning and all this stuff. So it's like, are we really living in it's a psychological description, right? Or prescription or something. And so or diagnoses or something. So I think that that's interesting and maybe should be noted that survival mode is a psychological condition or state. But how does it relate to our actual physical, biological survival? And then, yeah, it seems to be like maybe, I mean, this is just my postulation, is that to weave in the fact that actually our forefathers and foremothers like took great, even though it was them surviving, we kind of paint this picture like that was just always horrible, you know, or and don't get me wrong, like there are real challenges in that. And so I don't know, it's kind of like being able to have a reverence for the fact that, you know, modern inventions can help ameliorate and help facilitate further easeful living, but we don't want to overlook some of the like almost phenomenological and I want to say psychosomatic benefits or like nourishment that came from having to be with fire, having to be with the elements, having to be with yeah, the relationship with animals and how that really shaped humans. And so yeah, it's easy to just either say all or nothing, right? Like, oh, we should just go back to you know, living off the grid, or we should and kind of like just painting that as the only answer. Like if you have to be in survivor mode, but that can also make people not think about joy and like the enjoyment of it. So, but you could also think about it in terms of just enjoy your life and don't worry about learning skills or don't worry about being in touch with nature. You'll be fine. But then, you know, that kind of thriving in the technological essence makes people depressed and not in touch with their bodies and not in touch with their intuition and stuff. So that was a lot, but I'm going to just throw it out to you ladies and we'll see where it goes. So thanks again for being with me today.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you. It's wonderful to finally meet you, even in the cyber world. Yeah, I think you're speaking to a lot of the ideas that have been running through my head for a long time as well, Michelle. Like I think, you know, I think about, you know, old humans, like back in the day, and they, you know, lived in huts outside, and tigers were going to attack their villages, and there was like real, I'm going to call that real danger, like real things to have to survive. And then you look at modern day humans, and, you know, we have AC and everything that we could possibly want, food that could be door dashed to us, right? And there's not this like sense of true, in my feeling, like real survival anymore. We just kind of take that for granted. We can survive. We'll make it to the next day because we have all of those things. However, I'm still noticing that people are reacting to things from a place of like fear. And I'm trying to figure out where that fear is coming from. Because again, I don't have a tiger coming to my door. I don't have, these like other villages trying to impede onto my space. But I still, even myself, feel like I often act from a place of this like fear, almost survival response. And so for me, when I think about this surviving and thriving and like, how we use the skills that we have, I get almost confused because I don't know if I'm talking about like true biology and how I'm supposed to survive in the world or how I'm supposed to survive in this world that we've conjured up that is been almost like created and is like, yeah, like a psychological, almost like video game. It's like, where is the true like death in the game versus, oh, I can just restart, right? Like, where's the real fear when playing this game? And I guess I'm just sort of seeing that people are acting as if there's real fear or that there's like real danger, but I don't see it, but it's being felt. And so that's where I feel like my biology is adapting is like fear towards something, but I'm not exactly sure what. And so that's what these new survival skills, I'm calling them, seem to be popping up, but I don't know what we're trying to survive, what we're trying to fight. And so I think that's where I'm coming at. That's the perspective I'm looking at this from. And I wonder if that brings up anything for you guys.
Well, I'm just frantically writing notes here so I don't forget anything. I don't know how much they're going to tie together, but um, I was just looking for a quote from Florensky, see if I can find it really quick. Here we go. So, oh no, it's not here. Well, maybe it is. Okay. So this is in The Pillar and Ground of the Truth. He says, Sophia is the great root of the whole creation. That is, and that's from Romans 8:22. That is, Sophia is all integral creation and not merely all creation. Sophia is the great root by which creation goes into the intra-Trinitarian life and through which it receives life eternal from the one source of life. Sophia is the original nature of creation, God's creative love, which is shed abroad in our hearts by the Holy Spirit, which is given unto us, Romans 5:5. So there's so much more I could read there, but I won't. It's a because there's a lot in every sentence with this guy. So what I wanted to point out is that what a lot of people misunderstand about the role that creation plays in our lives, and I'm talking about our biology, our surroundings, the lizard brain, let's say, is that it's not just creation merely, as he says. It's not merely creation. It's all integral creation. So it's how creation acts and interacts and reacts and is interdependent on everything in it, right? I'm not a scientist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm just a person who's lived on the land for a long, long time and thought about these things because that's how I occupy my mind is by thinking philosophically, Michelle. I philosophized my life.
Life.
Yes. The embodiment. I love it.
Yeah. And my question is always when I see something occurring, I always say, how is that related to everything around it? Why is that happening? Not why is just that happening, but why does that happen in relationship to everything else around it, right? And then of course, you're going to get like a very connected way of seeing the world if you ask the question like that. You can hyper focus in on a target in on one thing, but nothing is ever affected by one thing because of all integral creation, right? And Sophia, for Florensky, Bulgakov, Soloviev, all those guys, is wisdom. So if you can immerse yourself into how do I want to put this? Like a frame of mind that this is an integral way of seeing the world. It's not that targeted, hyper-focused way of seeing the world. It includes, I like to use the idea of peripheral vision. Peripheral vision is super interesting to me because you can actually have peripheral hallucinations. Did you know that? I experienced them once. And it wasn't a mystical experience. I was on some medication and I had this hallucination that felt very real to me. I can tell you what happened just to illustrate it. I was walking down from milking my goats through a field, and suddenly there was a stop sign right in front of my face. And you know how you kind of come to awareness right when you're going to walk into something, how terrifying that moment is. That's how I felt. I was like, and I stopped, and then I looked, and there was no stop sign. So I kept going, and then there it was again. And I thought, when did that happen? Why am I seeing a stop sign in the middle of the field? Because that's just ridiculous, okay? And so I was playing with my eyes to find out where the hallucination came from. And I found out that when I looked down to the ground, there it appeared. And so I went to my doctor and I said, I don't know what's happening here, but I saw a stop sign in the middle of my field, like several times. And it appears to be when I'm looking at the ground. And she said, oh, those are peripheral hallucinations. You can't take that medication. So that was another philosophize my life moment, because I thought, oh, how much is going on out here that we're not aware of. Okay. And I think that's how all integral creation influences and speaks to us, is out here. It's subconscious, right? So, and I can't stress that enough, because people think that if they go for a walk, they're going to experience creation. No, they're in creation. They're in it. As soon as they come out of the womb, actually in the womb, they're in it. So, and it's speaking to them. It's talking, because it's a conversation. You're in a conversation with it. So anyway, and everything I've learned through animals. Okay, so I'm gonna, like, ad nauseum give you animal examples. And it's not because I'm a crazy cat lady, okay? Just and I don't believe in anthropomorphism. I don't anthropomorphize my animals. I don't think that they think like I do and feel like I do. And that grants me the opportunity to actually see them for what they really are. So I try not to. It's hard sometimes, but I try not to project me onto them. So if I have to deny an animal something, like this morning, as soon as I woke up, my dog's out there going, she's up. I can get the cat food, because he always manages to sneak the cat food when I let him in. I know what he's thinking, because he's an opportunist. That's really what he is. Okay. It's not about me. So I'm like, no, you have to wait. And he's whining and carrying on. And then I just go back in the house and I can't, I have to say to myself, I'm not hurting his feelings. I'm ruining his plans, but I'm not hurting his feelings. Okay. So, um, that was a lot, but I had to establish that foundation. Um, so when it comes to surviving and thriving, my experience has taught me, first of all, that you can think you're surviving only, and you can think you're thriving only. But I think that when you're surviving, you're thriving. So there's there's two, I think that for modernity, thriving, like when I hear about human flourishing, I just, it kind of bothers me because someone's idea of, let's say Sam Harris, okay? His idea of human flourishing is a world without pain and suffering. Well, if that's the case, you'll never get off the couch. Because I guarantee you, every time you get up to do something, you're going to experience pain and suffering. Because you're not going to want to do it. It's going to be too hard. Psychologically, you might feel like a victim because why couldn't somebody else do it? Like there's a million reasons why getting up and doing something is painful. Maybe you have a broken leg. Maybe you've got, a degenerative disease, and it just makes your life more difficult, right? So if human flourishing is a world without pain and suffering, then that's a world that I really don't want to live in, honestly. Surviving and thriving, to me, is what, Michelle, what you're doing with your garden, okay? You're planting a garden so that you can eat the food, which is a survival way of living in the world. It's self-sustenance, right? Self-sustaining. And it requires work. It requires overcoming procrastination, right? And which all will induce pain and suffering. Okay. As soon as you have to do that, you're in the world of pain and suffering. But when you're finished working in your garden and you come in for lunch, you feel like you're thriving. You feel rich because you've cared for something. You're caring for the plant, you're caring for your family, and you're providing something for the future, which is really important for human beings. We are future oriented, right? I wouldn't say animals are not future oriented, but not as future oriented. So they don't worry about it. We worry about it. So I'll just start with that. That's my thesis, is that surviving is thriving. But it depends on whether or not you're going to categorize those two things. If you want to keep them separate, and that's why all integral creation is really important, right? Because you can't keep things separate. But if you want to keep them separate, then you could be in a victim mode, which is surviving only, or you can be in a thriving mode, which means you never get off the couch and everything just comes to your door.
Mm.
So those are my thoughts.
So good. So good. I loved it. I loved all that you both shared. And I thought you raised some really good questions, Megan, and some great points about like, oh, so I wrote a lot of notes too. Hopefully I'll get around to it all and then we'll keep looping. But your point about people are still reacting as if there's real danger, that's so good. And it made me think of this woman, she's a mom, and she talks a lot about basically the term is conscious parenting, but yeah, which is, that's a whole nother topic. But I do think that bringing a conscious awareness to things is very important. And she's just saying that, but focusing on parenting, right? Bringing conscious awareness to parenting is important, because what she was saying is that people are reacting. And literally, if you look at what they're doing, how people might respond and behave, and how kids and parents will kind of react to each other sometimes in not becoming as conscious. It's literally in basically the lizard brain phase of like how how people are reacting. Like you would really only yell like if you were, again, like something's actual danger is happening, you like burned yourself, or you know what I'm saying? Like when would yelling kind of occur for humans? And yet people can do that, not just kids and parents, right? But people who are mad at each other, like people yell at each other. What, yelling is about like getting attention, right? Why does the voice get louder? So that it can get attention and get help immediately, right? So that's such a base survival thing, but people are doing this because they got irritated with each other, right? Or they're not cooperating, like, and so, but would that cooperation lead to actually surviving, or just like it functioning better, the relationship just functioning better? It seems like people are yelling. It's almost like it sort of reveals how we are still, like maybe to your thesis about Shari, where it's surviving is thriving, because if we still do this anyway as humans, like we still have that primordial lizard brain there. It's there. It's a part of our story. It's a part of who we are. So we will use it anywhere. We will still use it and transpose it on our situations, even if there's no tiger. We'll still find a way to do it, it seems. And so that's, I think, for Caitlin, this mom who talks about conscious parenting, her thing is like, let's bring that to awareness that we do have that primordial brain, but then also realize that we have a cognitive capacity as humans that is so unique to us because we have language, or verbal language. Obviously other creatures have other languages too, but we have a consciousness and a sentience that's very much like tied to language and communication and communing with other beings. That is so that's like the next level of our species. And so if we don't become more aware of that, we do allow ourselves to be reacting as if there's imminent threat and imminent danger, when it's not. It's not actually at that level. It's more about like, let's learn how to actually connect with what is really going on, so that we can solve the problem, so that we can de-escalate, so that we can, whatever it is. Now, obviously, there are situations where yelling might occur, like relationally, because of safety reasons, and but that's obvious to see how that relates back to just survival, right? But it's when people are yelling at each other because they're mad at each other or something. That's just like, what, what's going on there. So, anyways, it was just interesting to me that she said that, because I hadn't ever thought about it that way. That the demonstrations that people have are sort of more on the side of like they are doing a survival type thing, even though there's no direct relationship between that thing going a certain way and people being safe. It's more like behavior, right? It's like the thing that it's trying to achieve often with that reactivity is a type of, we want, you need to behave a certain way for civility, or, like I said, cooperation, or just for things to be nicer, I guess, more pleasant. So people are not like, yeah. But anyways, there's that, which I thought was interesting. And I don't know if that's just because, again, I think you asked the question, Megan, of like, it doesn't seem like there is actually a real danger, yet people are still responding as if there is. And so where does the actual danger lie? I do wonder if that's why in a first world type dynamic, it's like the danger is actually on the spiritual level. Like the danger that we have to become more aware of is that almost the peripheral hallucinations, if you will, like, because there's so much going on in like around us and in our fields of like the spiritual, we don't always realize that, but it is just as, it's just as real in a sense, and I think that's why Christianity is so helpful, because it kind of reminds us about the metaphysics at play, where when it says about, Satan trying to steal, what is it, steal, kill, and destroy, like that's the tiger, right? That's the tiger becomes the spiritual forces that are trying to, whatever, destroy you, bring you down. It's like make you never want to leave your bed or whatever it is, so that you never do anything to survive/thrive, right? If we want to make the connection between those two. So I don't know, it made me think that that could possibly be an answer to entertain, is that the real danger today is the spiritual. And in terms of this ability for people to like just restart the game, I do think that's even though I think there can be a sublative, obviously Daniel and I talk about a lot, like there can be a good in the the virtual or like the online, the internet. But the issue is when people get stuck in the they never like a lady she's really great, Jyoti, she's over from like the philosophy portal realm. She was talking about how it's almost like the fact that the internet devices that the internet can perpetuate and enable never let you go too far. Like they because they can always keep you in that, there's a bubble of the screen, and so it can't really make you, like, I mean, in a sense it can and it can't. Like, sure, could somebody start losing their job or whatever because of the addictions they have through their phone? Absolutely, right? But there's such a concealment, and like nobody else knows about it, and it cannot burn you physically. So it's almost like it never gets bad enough for people to realize that this isn't just something you can keep hitting the restart button on, if that makes sense. And yeah, there's actually a real truth in the fact that, like, even spiritually speaking, that's the whole concept of redemption and like new life, is that God always offers the fact that you can start any moment over again, in a way. So there's like a good thing in being able to restart, but there's also the lack of responsibility that it can enable if people think, well, oh, it's not really real, so I'll just hit that restart button because it doesn't really matter, right? I'll just boo 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 boo. I'll just be shooting, like just thinking about a shooter game or something. Like, you can just do that to yourself and others with your words, with your mentality, with how you live, and yet you don't think it matters because it doesn't feel as real as scratches, burns, harm, pain, all of that stuff. It doesn't feel like that. So it doesn't feel as consequential. And so you think, well, I'll just restart my life if something bad happens, right? I'll just start another account. Or, this is what people do. Like, there's a proliferation of like anonymous type of accounts that people can just kind of run and, do their sort of like thing covertly. And it's like, there's a real risk in that and a real challenge in that. And I think Peterson probably talked about that too. I don't know if it was him, but he was talking about like the anonymity that people have, so they don't take responsibility for saying something mean because they never see the person's reaction, and they also don't have to admit that they said it, And so, yeah, that's a major issue, of course. But yeah, I think, again, that's a little bit all over the place, but to kind of bring it back, I do think that the real danger may be the spiritual today. More so. I mean, there's always both in a sense, but it's almost like like Danielle and I will talk about, like, we live in it used to be task-based society. Now we have a voice-based society. So now words and ideas and the spiritual is a lot more weighty in terms of what we have to pay attention to and tend to. Like, it's almost like just as important that you tend to that, like a garden, as it is with the garden. That's the nice thing about having the physical stuff, though, because it reminds you, like, no, you got to get up and go water. You have to go do the thing. And the necessity of that is now, it's almost like where Nietzsche talks about, like, what's the language he uses? Something about like binding some law on your neck that you choose, but that's what it is in the modern age. It's like having to choose a necessity, which is kind of an ironic concept, but it's like what we have to do as humans today is to choose it to be as necessary to do the work of the spiritual, so that we can contend for ourselves and our lives and those around us, and do that in the right way. So that was on what, like, that's kind of relates to what you brought up, Megan, and a little bit on what you brought up too, Shari. And there's something else I was thinking about with this. Yeah, I really like the concept of like integral creation. And I was thinking about that too, where, you know, you were saying, like, how does this relate? I think that's a fantastic question. And I think that would really help us all slow down quite a bit when something occurs, because it is so easy. And I do think that it's actually just two sides. Well, there's some psychologists that like popularize the victimhood triangle. It's like villain, victim, savior. I want to say something like that. I think, but they're all kind of essentially going to be victim type roles. Because I think, like you're saying, the survival mode victim is a type of like, and it's not, there are real victims, of course there are, but it's also a mindset that you can just take on, because it's easier to blame everyone else and blame everything else and blame whatever versus taking agency. So that's, the survival mode can fall into the victimhood, and then the person on the couch who's thriving and everything's brought to them sometimes often becomes a villain, right? They kind of just like, they become kind of a little tyrant, just, and I don't know if like somewhere in the between might be the savior. That would be interesting to think about that schematically. But all that to say is that why I'm bringing this up is because how it relates to the integral creation, and how does this relate to that? Sometimes it's easy to see something that's wrong and then just think, it's that thing versus like, what's the ecosystem? Like what's the context? And, but it's sometimes, especially relationally, it's scary to think about that because it's like, oh, it's just easier to think, well, that person has a problem and they just need to fix it. And if they just stop doing that thing or they start doing this differently, then everything would be okay. But that's really not what's at play. What's at play is a nexus and a context. And it doesn't mean they have no responsibility. They do too. Of course they do. But it also is reflective of me and the other like participants in that energy field and like the ecology that's going on. So yeah, that's important because it's if we don't ask the how is this related, we just get into this reductionist kind of pigeonhole of what the thing issue is, which doesn't even allow us to solve it, right? Because if it's like we just look at this, what does this give us to work with besides this very thing? Like if you get the context and you're like, oh, I see, there's like these facts. It's like if I were to just see the strawberry that was picked at and then be like, what's wrong with you, strawberry, right? Never mind the fact that there was a mockingbird that had come and it, it had flown in and and then I need to realize, okay, I need to shield these berries, etc. But you know what I'm saying? Like it's kind of a little, hopefully that can be a good analogy of just if you just see something wrong with the strawberry, but what's its soil like? What are the predators? What are the other things going on in the atmosphere to make it be problematic and have an issue with it, right? It's not really actually the strawberry didn't do anything. It just sat there. It was the contextual things that impacted it. Now, again, in human terms, everybody also contributes things to issues occurring, but it's important to always put it in context. So that question of, again, how is it related is so powerful. Is so powerful and so necessary, but can feel scary for us humans, I think, because it's like, well, what if that relation to this is something that, especially when it comes to like human relationships, because I think doing it just like I do it the same thing. Like when I'm reading, I think about how does that relate to our spiritual well-being. So then I think about weeding and getting the root and all the stuff, right? But then it comes back up again. I don't know, there's a lot. I used to like write a lot more about this, but yeah, there's stuff you can gather from just weeding a garden, that is on the metaphysical level. But like when it comes to human relationships, you're like, well, if I see it in the context, then what does that mean that I might have to face in myself? That feels affronting sometimes, but also exciting. And I mean, I brought it up in conversations with Daniel on our OG Rose conversations, but that should actually be a moment of empowerment of like, wow, I can shift things. And that's something that I can do because I can't actually control another human being, but I can control myself and I can set conditions and I can create conditions for whatever, for the environment to be X way versus Y way. So those are the things that all came to my mind off the top. Okay, one last thing. I really love this idea of like the difficulty that it can take. Daniel and I had this in our talk that's going to come up tomorrow, is this talking about willpower versus relinquishment. And I'm not sure I'm going to be able to flesh it out verbally right now with the two things, but the main thing is that it does take willpower to make yourself get out of bed to do the things. At the same time, if it was all willpower and just pushing yourself, you're probably not going to enjoy it and it's not going to thrive as well. So you have to find a way to let the willpower be a catalyst into the relinquishing, in the sense of you relinquish yourself to the work where it becomes not just a drag and a dredge and a misery all the time. Because and I can say like doing things logistically can also help, like to think about conditions, creating conditions and spatial arrangements and how you engage with things. Like, okay, random, but, and I will close this soon. Daniel made these beautiful raised beds for me out of old barnwood, and they're very pretty. And I had an idea for it, and he, I told him the idea and he just made it happen. And I feel so thankful and excited. And like, there's something about the way I tend to the plants in these beds that is different. And I don't know if it's just because I have the vision and the desire, but it's almost like, I mean, there's just a different relationship I have. And doesn't mean, I mean, I have always loved and enjoyed the garden, but sometimes there's like a more of that drudgery type of like, oh, I gotta get like, but with these beds and with maybe more of the way that we've structured things this year, and we put little, like we just, things have just been brought over, like, oh, would you like this? Would you like that? And we've like made it more of a space, or like a nicer area, even though it's just stuff we've already had. It makes me feel more like an alacrity to go out and do the work. And then there is that kind of flip moment too, like, yeah, it can be kind of laborious, but then, like you said, there's this feeling of like, that was so nice. And as I was filling up the watering can today, I was like, it just seems like humans need to care for stuff. Like that's actually a way they care for themselves, is to
Yeah.
care for things and so it's so important. But again, when everything's taken care of for people these days, it's almost like nobody knows what to care for and what should they prioritize and what should, and then is it so, and then there's just so many other questions it can spiral into for people psychologically. But yeah, it was, there's almost like this flip moment, I want to say, where, and it's, and I do believe that like humans almost have a capacity to like collapse time or like reintegrate. It's literally like they transform the past with how they understand the present, or something like that, or like this eternal now that's the future being subsumed into the past. And it's like when you have that flip moment of the genuine pleasure of it, it almost makes it all like it was pleasurable, if that makes any sense. So I've been thinking a lot about pleasure lately. So anyways, I just want to say that, and I'll throw it back to you ladies, but thank you.
Just
Thank you
really
guys so much.
quickly,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then we'll let Megan
Mm-hmm.
talk. But when you were talking about your raised beds,
Yeah.
first of all, they were made with love.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, and secondly, they are beautiful. Those were the two key things that I heard you talking about when you described them. That, and so when you fill them up with love and they are beautiful, you are invited into beauty. Okay. And that's where all integral creation actually manifests itself. It manifests in beauty, right? So I just wanted to add that.
I love that. Thank you.
Wow. You guys give me like tingly feelings. I want to like
I do
say,
too. I was like getting tingly feelings.
I like want to say something at the end of every sentence that both of you guys just, I wrote down so many things. And so like, I think I know where to start, but for a while I was like, wow, this is going to be tragic when it comes back to me. But I'll start by talking about this past year. I had really intense pain in my lower back, felt it all the way down my leg, like had some like inability to like lift my foot, like just, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't like I couldn't drive. I couldn't do like all the things I really love to do. I couldn't walk really. All that to say, by the end of like 2 months, I ended up getting a surgery and everything's great now. But after like about 2 months, I realized that my literal vision, my literal way of attending was like here. I didn't have like, because I was in what I'm going to now say is a true survival mode, all of the irrelevant things for my personal being were gone. Every time someone talked to me, and if it wasn't specifically relevant to what I needed in that space, I had no energy for it. And I bring that up because I think the way that society gives us or throws at us or fire hoses at us all of these distractions, it's similar to the amount of like nerve reactions of pain that I was getting, and it was taking away the context of the world. And so when you were talking about this like peripheral vision, and like I was thinking of like soft vigilance, like when you're meditating, or when you're just like walking through, or like you come to like a stop sign, and sometimes you don't actually have to look right, look left to know that there's no cars coming. And something about the way that we have like structured society right now, I feel like we're all looking in here, and just like what Michelle was talking about, like, oh, if this is the problem and we're not looking at this, then we actually can't like attend to the problem correctly. And so in my mind, when we're in this survival mode fully, I think you're right. Like I think you can't be thriving. I think thriving is the peripheral contextual relevance, along with the literally what I'm looking at in the moment problem. And I think there's like something about the way, well, one, the way that we're looking and we have the peripheries, but then also I wanted to add this idea of like parasites And I'll also link that to the idea of like the ideas that we have that don't have their own true legs, like you haven't like vetted them out. Also the stories that you tell yourselves that keeps you in these loops. And how not only are we like not getting the context, but then also the feedback that we're getting seems to be unnatural to me. Like I feel like the I'm afraid of something feels like an unnatural fear. Like I feel like it's coming from something that's not me. And I think there's like this parasitic way that we have like, I don't know, we've like ingested all these things, right, from society, and we've like created these stories or these ideas, and they're living as parasites within us and are guiding our response to the world. And so then not only do we not get the context, but then when we're getting the feedback, we're getting feedback that might not be us. It might be something that is like possessing us or living off of us. And so I feel like there's this need for a purging or a purification or a like fasting or a something about getting back to the like baseline, because otherwise we're just going to keep being in this survival mode and getting feedback of what we think is like perfectly good information back from the world that allows us to be in relation with it. But I think we're in like a wrong relation right now. And so I think that's where this like fear is coming from, at least in my mind, because I believe that what we're supposed to be doing is constantly relating to the world and seeing how it's affecting us, and then like be motivated to do more for the world. But I feel like I'm not getting that intrinsic motivation that seems to be something that would be a natural consequence of just like living a proper aligned life. And so if I'm doing all these things and I'm not getting that intrinsic motivation, there must be something in the way there. There must be something like not truly real there, which relates me back to the whole like internet thing of like, you know, even right now, like I've never met either of you in person. And so in a weird way, you still are not quite real to me, right? And I feel like there's all of these layers that are keeping things not being real. And so I don't have the like, I don't know, the raised bed made from love type of environment to create the beauty from, with all of these filters and parasites and lack of periphery, I guess, in my way. And so for me, I'm trying to grapple with like what is this phenomenon that's happening, and is there anything that we can do about it? Or is this like, what is this what life is? Like, is this how it's just supposed to be? And like, I'm just supposed to, I don't know, adapt to it, because that's what humans do, is we will adapt. That's why I lost my sense of relevance when, or I refined my sense of relevance when I was in such pain. And so is this like just showing that we are in a very like pain-filled society? And that's
Can
the,
I just can I just can I
yeah.
just jump in really quick before I forget this? Um, because you didn't lose relevance. You Everything became relevant. So this is the example that Jordan Peterson uses when he says when you're driving your car, right? The car is not relevant to you. As soon as it breaks down, everything about the car becomes relevant, and everything else is no longer relevant. Okay? And that's when you realize, like, so your body is your vehicle. It's the thing that you need to get around, okay, and do things, go from A to B, you know. And when it's not working properly, then it becomes totally relevant. That's it. That's the only thing that is relevant. That's why everything else becomes just a distraction. It's no longer, it doesn't matter what somebody's saying to you when you can't go from A to B. You know what I'm saying? I just wanted to point that out. It's there's this really interesting thing I've noticed in human behavior, or the way we try to sort out complexities. And because it's all integral creation, okay? So just keep that in mind, that we often have a cause and effect way of seeing the world. This happened, and that's why that happened.
Mm.
And that's very primitive. It's also a survival mechanism. But oftentimes, because of the complexity of creation, which is our context, okay, you guys have been talking about context all the time. Context for me is place in a novel. Like if you're a writer, you have to come up with a plot for your novel, and then you have to come up with a place for the novel to take place. The interesting thing, and I can't credit this to myself because I heard a guy talking about this once, and I went crazy with it, because the interesting thing is there are only, like, I think he said 7 plots really that you can write about. That's about it. But there are millions, infinite numbers of places where you can set those plots, right? And so the place is the context. And where are we placed? This is just, we're in a story, right? And where is the place? It's creation. It's the cosmos. So that is our context. That's always our context. Now I forgot why I was talking about this. Anyway, I just wanted to make oh, I know, because everything is so integrated, and we think linearly, cause and effect, right? Instead of having a more all-encompassing, and I'm making a circle here, view. We think that because nothing is relevant, I'm going to try to illustrate the backwardness of how we think. We miss the fact that that the thing that doesn't work has become relevant. We worry about the fact that everything else is no longer relevant, and we miss the fact that what we've done actually is make only this relevant, right? Because if we made other things relevant, it would be overwhelming. It's like if your car breaks down, that's your main concern. That is the only thing that is relevant because you're stuck on a highway miles from nowhere, okay? And that's when the lizard brain kicks in, right? Survival. I got to get going. And so it's a good thing, is what I'm saying. It's a good thing that now only the car is relevant, because, if you were crazy, you might wander off into a field and start picking daisies and forget that you need to get home and fix your car, like, or make the call, to the tow truck or whatever it is, because everything else is so relevant, right? And the car is no longer a concern. Does that make any sense, what I'm saying?
It does. Mhm.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to, I see a little bit of a weird backflip in the way that we approach the problem. And I'm not sure if, because I'm an observer by nature, I've started to understand that observant portion of my personality and this goes to literature, Michelle, is a third person perspective. So it's like you have to kind of come out of the situation, and this goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. Why am I doing this?
Mhm.
But not being in it, not feeling any of the pain, not being the person, but stretch yourself out kind of like a guardian angel and say, what's happening here? Because you've got more of a um, bird's eye view, right? From up here, from the third person. And when you do that, you suddenly go, oh, wait, no, it's not that nothing is relevant. It's that that is relevant. There's a really big difference there, you know? And you said something about, Megan, you said the stories we tell ourselves. That is a story you tell yourself. It leads to depression, is what it does. When you think that you don't care, because like Michelle said, we thrive when we're caring, right?
Mm.
When we're not caring, we stop thriving. So when you think that the story you're telling yourself is that I'm not thinking about anybody else. I'm not thinking about anything else. I don't care about my plant in the background there. You know, I've been there. I've been to the place where I walk into a room and realize all my plants are dead because they haven't been relevant to me. And then I can cry because I don't care about anyone, including my plants. Okay? But if I take the third person and say, oh no, it's actually not that you don't care, it's that in order to care, this has to be relevant to you. This pain, this problem, this inability to be mobile, this is more relevant because it allows me to care. That's compassion. That's looking at yourself in a way that actually helps you to care, actually makes the other things around you, in spite of the pain, relevant. It's a weird, like if you think linearly, you think that that can't work, but it does work. So anyway, I just wanted to point out those things. I don't know if that made sense to anybody.
Yeah, that's good, Sherry. There's a lot there. Megan, did you want to comment? Or I had something that came to mind, but
Yeah, go for it.
yeah, just I think it shows the power of like a subtle shift. I don't know, and I think that kind of reflecting and considering this question of like if we use the raised beds as an analogy, right, as a representation, how do you make the raised, like how do you take things from how they are and make it to be a relationship to it as if it's the raised beds, right? Um, and that's a question I've asked myself too. And I also um it's I feel like everybody does have their own process, and the raised beds also came from me like acknowledging certain things in myself. Like it seems so unrelated, but it came first from, I mean, I feel like it's funny because there's a lot of acceleration that can happen when you start to make certain shifts in your mindset about certain things and like start to work on certain things you're not attending to. And it's not because you don't care, it's because you do care about something else that needs to be almost primary so you can get to the place of the other care. Because I think what I'm hearing too, Sherry, is when you don't have the compassion for yourself, you stay stuck. You can stay stuck. Whereas you have to almost be able to acknowledge that there was a reason you were doing that at the time, and maybe you would do it differently if you could, but that was what you were doing. And so having compassion for yourself in that allows you the freedom to sort of move forward, if that makes sense. That's kind of how I was thinking about it.
Well,
But
I
I
think,
is that right? Do you think that's accurate, Sherry?
yeah, yeah. I mean, we have to be really careful with the language because people think, having compassion on yourself can become self-centered. You can
Yeah.
curl up into yourself, right?
Mhm.
But I think what I'm trying, it's really hard for me I haven't talked about this, so yeah. What it affords you is a bird's eye view of your struggle to care. Okay? It's not that you don't care, which is what you think when it's happening. It's that you're struggling to care. And that is a radical way of changing the perspective on your own pain and suffering, right? So, yeah, I'll just stop because
I love
it's
the
really,
I love hearing the process of your articulation, and I think that's really beautiful and helpful. I'm getting also the almost the feeling of allowing our own almost disembodiment, the third eye, right? Or the third
third
view,
person.
like third person view, right? The bird's eye view as a way to become more embodied, actually, like this necessity of the two that have a relationship. I'm just getting to this chapter in this book I'm reading that's so good. It's basically about the art of choosing. It's talking about birth, but it's also about life in general. And so it's really talking a lot about this really interesting, necessary relationship between those two things. And I do wonder if that like sometimes we like I think the hard part too might be, and again, you can just latch on to the story. Don't do this. Don't become a victim to this. But unfortunately, sometimes people in your life might see your situation and they will proclaim on you that you don't care. And then, because
Yeah.
I've seen this happen to, especially a particular woman in my life who's very dear to me, and somebody kind of claiming that on her, and then she just not knowing how to take on or create or demonstrate a different story. So that's what she kind of took on in certain ways. But really, what I'm trying to say is that you can't believe the lie that is you just simply don't care, because that's not true. And that's where the third person view and the bird's eye view can really help you to be able to
Yeah.
get better perspective. Because I guess I say that because like sometimes we don't understand, like we think, well, that person's has that distance from me, so they know better, right? Not necessarily. And I think this is showing a verticality in the perspective, the bird's eye view. It's the vertical, where it's almost like allowing the one, like you're saying, your guardian angel almost, or like this other dimension of yourself that is in touch with maybe the ability to see things you can't, but can show you, and trusting that, you know. So I don't know, that's some things that were coming to my mind. But I will say really quick on the question of like how to um, get in touch with your own reality. It's kind of like this very, very like, this is a very vulnerable and honest example, but I was like, okay, kids, like we need to go on with the tomato plants. Because and then like they're just sort of like, okay, mom, but like kind of like we were finishing up breakfast and they're reading this book together, and like my oldest is reading to the younger ones, and there's kind of this, there's not this kind of, okay, like they start moving, and
No,
sometimes, and because they're just, it's mom, like she, we'll get to it. Different when dad asks, but but also there's sometimes in those moments, I don't know if I take myself like, you can't expect other people to take you seriously when you don't take yourself seriously. And sometimes I see that dynamic, like it's a feedback loop in my children, and I don't, it's not something I'm like blaming them. I'm saying that I don't always take myself seriously because um of various reasons that I probably should again do the bird's eye view for. But it's very reflective. Like children mirror a lot about your own internal condition, and so and that doesn't, so it's like sometimes because you're not actually being direct, clear, straightforward, serious about something, don't be surprised when that's you're not going to get the seriousness of what you're kind of invocating or something like that. But I guess why I said that was because it goes back to what I'm trying to think about in terms of this feedback loop of like the world at large, and like all of the distractions and the fire hose of information, and all of the things that are going on. um the one thing that for me I found helpful in this realization of like, um I could either keep looking at that, or I can think, what can I do within my internal compass, or with my internal compass, to be able to better navigate in that type of environment, so that I can start to not be overwhelmed and consumed by that. But it's a process. And like I was saying, the raised beds is something that has come from probably, I want to say, let me think about the year. Okay, so yeah, probably about 10 months of like working inside of my own self in certain ways, if that makes any sense. And could it be a shorter time? Could it be a longer time for people? I'm not prescribing that. I'm just saying that it's funny how the things that like you kind of finally come around to orienting yourself and relating to something differently can take something that is seemingly unrelated, like shifts in my own internal landscape and orientations toward myself, that then led to my ability to have some sort of whim. I had a whim about raised beds. Like I think I'd like to do that. I don't really know why, but I did. And then, then it sort of like all kind of comes to fruition. And so I hope this is making sense, but I'm trying to address that question because I think it's a really important one, Megan. And I don't know that I can easily answer it necessarily, but I'm just trying to think about my own personal experience, because it is finding out that ability to have the orientation in a kind of fragmented world is important. And I want to give hope to the fact that it's possible, first of all, and then second, that it can take things that seem unrelated to get there. And I'm still on that process for sure. So, but it's just, yeah, like if somebody were to tell me a couple years ago because okay, for again, very vulnerable, like just my own life and whatever, like I remember reading the garden and I'm doing this all by myself. Oh, I'm just so over, all of the stuff you just tell yourself all the time about like that, I'm alone, and that overwhelming feeling of being alone and doing everything alone, and just the sweat and the overwhelm. And it's just like, if somebody had told me how I could be relating to something in a couple of years, I don't know that I could have believed that. But
Imagine
it's
it.
like,
Yeah.
but it really took like me also how I talk to myself and how I talk about myself. That sounds so like whatever. I'm not sure what it sounds like, but it matters. It really does matter. And it really does lead to shifts and changes over time. But I do think that it starts with something that's not, you can't see how it relates directly to making raised beds and relating to your garden differently. It's the internal garden, it's the internal landscape that often has these physical yields that relate to it, to relate to that very thing. I don't know if that
Well,
sounds too abstract. I don't know if
Michelle,
that, yeah. So,
when you say that, what comes to my mind is that the kingdom of God is within you.
mm,
What
yeah.
is, so the question is, well, what is the kingdom of God? Is that bliss? Is that, human flourishing? No, it's eternal. That's what the kingdom of God is. It's eternal. So when you reorient, right? And like I'd like to get back to the Megan's query about fear, and anxiety about things that we can't name them, right? I just have this fear. Um, the reason that I think the reason that Christ talks about that is because he's calling you to the present moment,
Mm.
where, like you said, you you can actually change the past in the present, right? And Christ says, don't worry about the future. So this is something that I said earlier, like, animals don't, they're not necessarily future oriented in the same way we are. They prepare for things. We all know squirrels store nuts, and, birds build nests, and, they are future oriented, but they don't worry about the future. We do, because the future is unknown, essentially. It's just it's an abyss to us. That's what the future is. It's an abyss that we can fall into, which makes us afraid, right? And so when you live as if the kingdom of God is within you, you can actually make time go away, which is what eternity is. There's no time in eternity, right? You can make it go away. So, and here's an example from my personal life. I was I was in a very bad psychological state, like very bad. I'd been hospitalized, and I came home. It was Christmas, And I just at the time I described myself as an egg with no shell, just a membrane.
Mm.
Okay. That was it. And I was very careful not to poke myself up against anything too sharp because I knew if I did, I'd fall apart all over the floor. And after Christmas, my husband went back to work, and I'm standing in the middle of my living room, and there's a tree covered in decorations. And I'm just like, I can't do this. So then I took the third person perspective. Why can't you do it, Shari? What is it about this tree that you can't handle? Well, I'm thinking about the future, actually. I'm thinking about how long it's going to take me. I'm thinking about how tired I'll be after it happens. I'm thinking about how I have to go get all the boxes. I have to find places for everything. And at the time, I had a brain injury. So it was like, even just thinking about where to put something or remember things was hard, right? And then I thought, okay, well, what happens if you don't think about the future? How does it look to tackle that Christmas tree without thinking about the future? In other words, not looking for the box, not looking for the place for the decoration, not, you know, what happens? Well, it means I take one decoration off the tree and I put it where it belongs, and that's it. That's all I think about. So I did that. I actually made it a little easier for myself because I was struggling with my brain. And I said, I'll take all the gold ones off, one at a time. And then suddenly I was done. I was like, wow, I'm done. Okay, now I'm going to take all the red ones off. And this might sound petty and silly, but this became my philosophy for everything else that followed, right? How many things do you have to do today? And how many things can you do today? And what do you want to do today?
Mm.
And where would you start? And how can you do that without thinking about the future? Because when you do that, you are living in the kingdom of God. You're living in eternity. Time goes away. And that's what happened when I was trying to undecorate this tree. Time went away. I didn't know how long it took me to put all the gold balls off the tree. It didn't feel like forever, which you'd think it would because it's eternal. But that's actually when time is pressing in on you, right? No, it didn't feel like there was any time, none at all. And which was actually encouraging, you know,
Yeah.
because, and so then I did the red balls one at a time. And all of a sudden they were done. And I didn't know how much time had passed because I was in eternity. So, yeah. But Megan, you were talking about the modern world. I think a lot of the fear that people have is fear that they can't name because of information. Because we live in a information dense environment, unless of course we unplug completely. And information forms us, right? So I mean, if you imagine a little village, 1500 years ago, some traveler would come into town and he would bring information. And then the whole village would have to contend with the information. If it's credible, if it's something they should be afraid of, maybe he says there's an army on the way marching. You need to build a fortress, or whatever. But now we have that 24/7, right? We're not having it every, 2 years, you know? And Matthias Desmet talks about in his book, The Psychology of Totalitarianism, which I highly recommend because it really addresses a lot of these issues, is the criteria for one of the criteria for what he calls mass formation, which is actually not his theory entirely. Hannah Arendt talks about it, is free-floating anxiety. So it's an anxiety that doesn't have a name.
Hmm.
You can put it on anything, right? And so I just thought I'd read you a quick excerpt. Well, and one of the criteria that has to happen before that is isolation, loneliness, actually, a sense of loneliness and atomization, which of course we're all experiencing in the world today, right? So he says here, the third condition is the widespread presence of free-floating anxiety and psychological unease within a population. Free-floating anxiety is a form of anxiety that is not image-bound. In contrast to anxiety that is image-bound, for example, fear of thunder, snakes, and war, such anxiety is mentally difficult to manage and presents the constant risk of turning into panic, which is perhaps the most aversive psychological state for human beings. For that reason, a person in that state seeks to link their anxiety to an object. So they're looking for something. They need an enemy, is
Hmm.
essentially what it is. Free-floating anxiety can be traced back to the first two conditions. A person who has lost his bond with the big O other, these are the preconditions for free-floating anxiety, and does not feel meaning, typically experiences an indefinable unease and anxiety. So you lose your bond to the big O other and you have no meaning in your life, right? Then you have this free-floating anxiety. This condition has been strongly present in the first decades of the 21st century. For example, the World Health Organization reports that 1 in 5 people worldwide has been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. These numbers are striking, all the more so because they are likely an underestimation. And the incidence of mental suffering in general, including the cases that go undiagnosed, is of course even higher. This can, amongst others, be concluded from the enormous consumption of psychotropic drugs. Um, yeah. Anyway, he goes on to the fourth condition, which is aggression because of free-floating frustration. And the link between social isolation and irritability is logical and has been established empirically. So I think, and then if in my own mind, I've dragged Jung into this conversation about free-floating anxiety because I think that his idea of the collective consciousness, which I would also call morphic fields, aka, a la Rupert Sheldrake, and I would also call a great cloud of witnesses, according to the scripture. Um, if that field, if that collective consciousness, if that spiritual realm is one of unease, right? That the energies that we have in our bodies are being, released like carbon dioxide into the world. We're going to feel that on a mass scale. Like if large numbers of people are having serious anxiety issues, people who don't necessarily have a reason to be anxious will feel anxious, I think. They just will. And it'll just be in the air and it'll be unnamed, right? I mean, I don't know if you've ever been in an emergency, but that's what happens. There's a thing that is in the air, a feeling, right? Where people are like, first they're afraid and then they all get to work. Those are spirits that kind of hover above the the group, so to speak. So I don't know what you think of that, Megan, but Just some thoughts.
Yeah, no, definitely a lot there. I think I'm such like a, I don't know, a metaphor person. And so I like to think about, and I'm like a biology and physics type of person. So what
Mhm.
I thinking about in this regard is, I guess, the idea of like a nucleus or like some sort of electronic
Yep.
orb, and that almost being like your your personal like perspective. Stick with me, hopefully.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I'm
and
loving it.
how as like as an atom, like as a human being, like we exchange charges all over the place, right? And if you have a lacking of integrity of atomic mass, you're very easily exchanging these charges and moving from the most chaotic to the next most chaotic, and don't have a lot of grounding. So there's a lot of movement
Hmm.
out of your control. So I feel that, and then I also feel like, as above, so below, inside, if there's a lot of, we're talking specifically about, like the stories or the information, the way that you were formed, if there's like, I'm going to say it as like objects in the way, the charges that are inside you are constantly banging onto these objects, creating more energy internally. And so it's like the smaller you are, so the less integrity you have, right? And the smaller your perspective, the more, I don't know, free radical type charges that you are like producing. And so I'm thinking about it as like having a larger atomic mass, but then also having a wider perspective. Like you were saying, like you in that third person, like if you're in it, if you're like in it, I can't see the
Yeah,
whole
yeah, yeah.
thing. But as soon as I back up just a little bit, I give it more space,
Hmm.
I can just see more of it. I'm in like somatic therapy right now, and the idea of like creating a larger room for your emotion to exist has been profound to me, because it was, oh, I take up more space than just the outline of my body. That's fascinating. I thought I had to keep my emotions locked in here. And when I gave my emotions room, a larger space to inhabit, I'm like, oh, I can see that for what it is. And I think there's something about the charges and the atomic mass
Oh, yeah.
that all sort of lean into what I think you were saying, just probably in a more eloquent and more theological.
Oh, I don't know.
But
I thought you did a fantastic job.
I feel like we're saying the same thing, even though
Yes.
it's something
Yeah,
very.
yeah.
So hopefully that
Well,
tracks.
yeah, and I love that you're using a natural analogy. You're talking about all integral creation, and so like I've said this a lot in the corner, we have to realize the story we're in. This is what you just illustrated. The story that we're in is always being told.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's being told on every, micro and macro levels. But it's always the same story, Megan, which is just absolutely like I have thrown this spaghetti up against the wall many times and tested it, and it never fails.
Yeah.
Okay. If we talk about the particular, we're always talking about it's always an analogy to the general. That's a Goethe quote. Okay. So you're talking about you. Okay. And it maps on to the general. It's so interesting. The particular, if we talk about the particular, it becomes a universal. If we talk about the universal, it just dies out. It loses substance, literally, because it's not embodied in a person, right? It disperses like ashes on the top of of water. Like it doesn't have any, that's why when things become global, when people talk about universalism, let's say Unitarian Universalism, for example, it becomes a nothing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
a no thing. because it has to be particular in order for it to speak universally. This is another one of those backflips, that we think, no, we got to make it universal so everyone feels included. You make something universal and nobody feels included.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll be quiet.
What say you, Michelle?
Well, that's
Yeah.
also good, also good. And yeah, I love this idea of your analogy, Megan, and also this idea of being able to substantiate yourself actually, and how that relates to your capacity to not give in to the chaotic energies, if you will, like, or be subsumed and take it, like, kind of thrust here and there, like, chaotically all the time. Because yeah, just because I think that relates so well to what Shari was saying about the third person view, or the bird's eye view, because again, this sort of spatiality, right, that you kind of allow yourself to do. And I think it's where we start to, like, again, excavate. It's like we go more out and we also go more in to do the work of that substantiation, um, which then allows us to be able to know how to move in the world. Because I heard you say, Megan, like, a lot of movement, right? And I think that's what's going on, is there's like a lot of like hamster wheel movement, basically. It's like, and if we don't recognize that as not being, like, it can feel like, okay, well, we've got some movement going on, but it's not the type of movement that actually has the purpose and the spatiality and the dimensionality that we actually crave and need as human beings. So yeah, like, it's kind of the idea of, like, busy doing nothing or something like that, like the frenetic energy that feels so wasted, or like it doesn't feel like it comes to anything, and you want it to just feel like it will come to something. But I think that's why doing this again, I was talking about it so abstractly, but this idea of, like, oh, somehow the fact that I can do this excavation inward and out, like kind of going out and going back in and doing this dialectical work on my own, getting perspective on my own self and my own emotions, my own reactions, my own past, the history that I come from, like, that is important, really important work, and it will relate to actual concrete decisions, like those, like you're saying. When you were talking, Shari, about the tree, like, I loved how that made me think of precise action, right, where you kind of almost say, like, just take, what's the precise action that I do next, don't worry about. And Daniel's really helpful for this for me, like, he'll just like, don't worry about that, don't worry about that, don't think about this, just take the precise action, like, what's the next thing you can do or want to do, right? You were saying it's like need, can, want, like, you want to think about it in relation to that. And that's why it's not like mysterious that if you actually give yourself some perspective, you start to say, well, what's working and what's not working? How would I like this to be instead of that way? How, can I make shifts to make that occur? And what are the small steps I can do to make that occur? And the fact that, we've got these raised beds now, like, was a whole series of steps, was a whole series of steps, but it's so cool to see how each little incremental thing builds into an orientation, like a relation to, and how that care and then intentionality is like part of what makes it the way it is, the way that you can relate to it, like the intentionality. And I think, well, there's that, probably one of those famous theologians who says, like, the road is paved with good intentions, or something like that. There is obviously the fact that intentions, yeah, there's a lot that can get into with that word, but there is something about, if we just think about it in terms of, like, in the word itself being indwelling, or something like intent, like, it's like in a tent, just literally just take it to the basic words, even though that's probably not the etymology of the word, but just thinking about this being in your own existence and in your own particularity is important, and acknowledging that it is your own particularity in the world. And so that means that you have a better bearings in your own reality when you can look at it and be honest with yourself about, what's working, what's not working. Why do that's interesting. Why do I seem to keep reacting this way? Like, what could be influencing that? And start doing some digging, and start doing some, like, work on that. And again, I guess I'm trying to also convince myself as I say this, because there are, like, some, like, integrating questions that I've been encountering in certain books I've been reading, like The Artist Way by Julia Cameron, really great book. And that's like literally a kind of almost rehabilitation for the creative self. It's almost like what's it called? Yeah, it's almost like going through a rehab for your creative self that she does through a book. And like there are questions that she'll pose, and so it's easy to just skip, like don't answer the questions and then be like, oh, like like wondering why I'm not maybe. And it's just kind of like when you start to feel stuck again a little bit, like why am I not changing in this area or developing in this? It's like, well, have you gone back to just have you answered those questions for yourself? Like, have you, or it's something that I often think about is like, have you faced your fears, or have you like listened to that sort of still small voice that said to do something that you kind of thought was silly? Whatever it is. So, I mean, there's a profound, I think, discernment that's required, because obviously I think there can be hijacking of this stuff for, well, that's another direction, but like, I guess what I mean to say is that, yeah, I mean, taking, this idea of like creating space for yourself is actually a very good thing. And I think what the trouble can be when you're saying about the compassion, how self-compassion can become selfish or whatever. And that's where I think you have to fight the fears and also feel confident enough in yourself to know that like, oh wait, I can allow myself to take up space and that not be selfish. Take up space in this kind of, like I'm saying, the bird's eye view, giving your emotions, like, because I think, but there is a reality to the fact that actually the funny thing is that self-deprecation is also selfish, right? It's also like when you hate yourself and when
Oh, it
you
is.
over glorify yourself, both is a selfish position. So
Yeah.
just remembering that, and then again doing the precise actions of what you can do. And if there's something you haven't maybe done, go back and do it. And do but again you're like, but why would it matter? I don't understand, like why. And again, maybe it doesn't. That's the non-rational thing about it. It's like maybe, oh, well, maybe it doesn't, but why do you have such a resistance to just taking some time to answer questions, to explore more about your own self or what automatically comes out? I do think that questions is maybe a little bit patterned for us because of school, where we think there's a right answer. So if we get questions, oh, well, what if I don't write the right answer? Or what if it's not perfect? Instead of just allowing it to flow forth, what just immediately comes off the top of your head? See what that shows you about you and who you are in your particularity. So yeah, that was a little bit all over the place, but those are some of the things that were coming to my mind.
Well, it's just really quickly, one of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking is because of the idea of taking a third person perspective, we dream in first person and sometimes second person and third person. And I think that dreaming is, I mean, it's a few things, but one of the things it is us contending with stuff that we don't understand. We're trying to understand something. So I don't know if you know this, but they've done a lot of studies with babies and learning stuff. Max Planck did this institute, and they would teach babies, like I think 6 to 9 months old or whatever, little mimic things, with puppets. And then the baby would, at first, they would time the reaction time with the baby. And then the baby would have a nap. They would come back after the nap, and then they would do the puppet thing, and the baby's reaction time was way faster, right? So they concluded that sleep was necessary for building embodied patterns into your neurological system, actually. So playing piano, to have a nap, you're learning something on the piano, you have a nap, you get up, you can play it faster. They always say, don't cram for an exam and don't sleep. Even skim, just go over something and then have a really good sleep and then get up in the morning. It'll actually be in your body and it'll come out of your body. So sleep is really important. Dreams are really important for us to process information, embed information, and personal experiences, right? And some of the more interesting dreams are the third person perspective dreams because they seem to give us a context for the thing that we're struggling with. I don't know if you have third person dreams, but if you do, suddenly you're aware of the place. That's usually for me the indicator, right? It was a really huge, forest, and it had all these doors, and this is like third person where you're you get to see the context. And it's almost like the last stage of a long process of first person, second person, third person dreams, They all seem maybe somewhat unrelated, but if you were to backward engineer them, they're probably all talking about a very similar thing. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I think, to me, we discover our original language in dreams. Um, and I think that original language is imagistic,
Mm.
and that goes way back to all the thinking I've been doing about George MacDonald's imagination essay, because he talks about the Ursprung, the origin of language as being creation itself, which is full of, and Barfield would call them representations, right? Images, trees, grass, wind, and that's our language. We take our language from that, right? So and so originally our language is poetic. It's metaphorical, Megan. Okay? Language is metaphorical because images are the body of metaphor.
Mhm.
That's what it is, right? And that's a huge subject, which I also love. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about third person perspective and dreams, and how we get a bigger picture, and more understanding, actually, not more knowledge, not more information, actually more understanding. That's what happens when we see context. We go, oh, I see. It's like the retrospective view of your life. When you go back, suddenly you can see the context, because, if you want to be metaphorical, you're higher up on the mountain, right? Just by nature of your age, you're getting to the end, which gives you a bird's eye view, right, of the road you just came up on. And suddenly you can see the landscape. You could see the curves and how they attach to this thing. And oh, yeah, now I get it.
I love that. I love those metaphors. Actually, just a little quick aside, I guess. One of my friends, she studied kinesiology when she went to school, and she was like studying like how to like the best process of like learning. And essentially, it was this idea of you study something, and then you eat or walk, and then you take a nap. And it was something about the like body embodied like metabolizing of it, and then the like rest, and again embodying it from a different perspective of it, and then to come back to it later, it was like significantly more retained. And there was like something about like the body knew it, it was able to metabolize it and develop itself in it. And I always thought that was fascinating, but when you were talking about that, I was like, yeah, that totally makes sense, that in dreams you like get a new perspective, and like your body literally feels it in a different way.
Mhm.
And that's pretty special, I
Well,
think.
the body knows a lot of things,
Mm.
and it's often trying to talk to the mind,
I'll say the mind talks.
but the mind has a way of dismissing it because it isn't relevant. Because the and this gets to, I learned, for many years I broke and trained horses, and that whole experience has just become like such a spiritual analogy, or even a psychological one. But like, we have our eyes in the front of our head. Peterson talked about this too, but when he talked about it, I already knew, and I was like, oh yes, this is great. We have our eyes in the front of our head, and so we're really good at aiming. Really, really
Mhm.
good at aiming. That's something that humans excel at, actually. I think Peterson talked about the fact that if someone points at something and you were to draw a laser line from their fingertip to the thing they're pointing at, it hits it right directly, which is amazing, right? So we're targeters, which I mean, if you look in the night sky and you see Orion, what is he doing? He is like the ultimate human being to me, aiming, right? He's aiming and he's shooting an arrow. Um, Now I forgot what I was going to say about this. Horse training and context. Was I talking about context?
But the body knows you're talking about like the
Body
body.
knows. Right. So if your eyes are busy aiming, right, at things, and your body's talking to you, your mind's like, sorry, we're busy right now. We're aiming. Okay. And I don't know if you guys, I mean, obviously, Megan, you've had some physical infirmities where when you get to that point where your body's like, okay, we're done now. Okay, we've been screaming at you for a long time, and you are not listening. So you know what? We're giving up. Maybe that'll get your attention,
Yeah.
right? And then we look at that in retrospect and we go, oh man, that was a sign. That was a sign. And that was a sign that this was coming. And now here I am because I didn't listen, you know? And we all know that bodies hold emotional trauma, right? Posture is a really good indicator of that. You know,
Hmm.
the way that we physically hold ourselves, in the world. So anyway, yeah, I'll, these are like all my favorite things, you guys. I can hardly stop talking.
Oh, I know. I love that. They're all some of my favorite. Well, yes, all of it. All the things you guys talk about are my favorite things. I'm always like, yes, yes. But yeah, I think that's the body. Hmm. I think there's something too so fascinating about like how yeah, there's something about trusting that like the body does know and the body does show. And so it's like this. There's almost a real ability because the head's always trying to figure it out, right? Usually it's like, oh well, what trying to figure out the answer, and the body's just kind of like, oh, we'll just continue to show you and demonstrate it to you.
Yeah, I just remembered what it was. I mentioned horse
Oh,
training and I
yeah.
missed that thread.
Okay.
Um, so there's this work that you do with horses in the round pen when you're training them, and um, you you can't talk to a horse,
Hmm.
okay? I mean, you can, but it's not going to make a difference. And so you basically have to move and control, and the horse is not on a lead or anything. It's free. You're in the middle of the round pen, the horse is on the edge, and you have to make it move, okay? So how do you do that? You do it with your body. So the trainer that I had who trained me, she said, imagine you have a beam of light right here in your chest. You guys can try this with your children or your dog or anything. Actually, dogs are a little bit different. They lean into pressure and horses move off of pressure. So there's a difference there. But you have a beam of light and you can place that beam of light on the hindquarters, on the ribs, and on the shoulder. And you'll get different movement out of the horse. You can push the horse backwards, you can push him against something, and you can make him move forward. Okay? And that's all you have. You have no language, no words, and just a beam of light. And it was really interesting. I went to a clinic and I was translating for a Swiss guy. That's the only reason I was there. As a I wasn't part of the clinic, but I got to take it all in. And there were people there who had very you know, they would be the kind of people who give you a limp handshake. That's how I that's how I would put it. And they couldn't get their horses to do anything. They could not move their horses. So when you have a beam of light here, you're literally, like Peterson says, standing up with your shoulders back, right? And you look at where you're pointing your light. That's how you're, because we're targeters. And I can look at the hind end, make sure that my light is actually up here, right? Not down here, but up here. And I can move that horse wherever I want. And what's really interesting about moving horses is that that is how you establish hierarchy. The lead mare is the one who moves the horses. Whatever animal moves their feet has power over them. Okay? So after a while, the horse is going around and around and realizing that I have power over it because I can make its feet move. And so what it does, and here's another backflip in what we would call our cause and effect. We'd think we're scaring it. What it does is it causes us to trust us. It causes it to trust us. Because now it can put its trust in me because I am the leader. Right? And that's how horses, that's their hierarchy. They have a leader. But here's the other thing. But everybody behind that leader will try to take that position eventually. And so they will constantly push on the leader. And if the leader can't make their feet move, then they take the spot and the leader has to go to the back of the line. It happens with old age usually, or sickness, right? But I'm saying all this because there's a language in our bodies and there's a conversation that our bodies are having with us that because we think that knowledge, words, information is so much more relevant to us, we don't pay any attention to it. And I can say, like, as a person who's lived on the land with domestic livestock and wild animals, the thing that marks another person as what we call a greenhorn is the fact that they stumble around with their bodies in ways that is offensive to creation. That's the only way I can describe it. You know, they walk into a field full of sheep and all the sheep, the whites of their eyes show, and you know, or they walk up to a horse and the horse takes off, you know, because they're actually, and you used this word earlier in the conversation, they're not aligned.
Yeah.
Their mind and their bodies are not aligned. Their bodies are stumbling around in a total misalignment with their mind, or their mind is stumbling around in misalignment with the body.
Yeah, I think that alignment is incredibly important. I think that's essentially why I started doing somatic therapy in the first place, because I felt such a disconnect between
Mind and body.
mind and body, and how I could talk anything into the ground and logically knew the answers to all of my problems. But the feeling of that was never resonated. It was never metabolized through. It stopped here and then would just come out if someone asked me about it. It was just regurgitated from the throat instead of like a felt thing. And so I think that that's really, really, really important. But I also think that, like, when you think about, going back to what you said, like if you think about the cells of a body, like the literal essence of life, they're not thinking about what they're doing. Like they are just doing. They're like living, but they're also always in relation to everything around them. And I like to think about it like we're different cells. Like, you know, Michelle can be a heart cell. Sherry, you can be, what do you want to be? Like a liver cell, maybe? Like, that's important. And I'll just be like a skin cell or whatever. And like thinking about all the different like things that we are doing is like always in relation to the bigger picture of the human body. And if I was just thinking about my role constantly and like deciding if I should or shouldn't do my role constantly, skin cancer would ultimately be dis-ease, right? Like you're talking about, like uneasiness and dis-ease would eventually happen. And I think
And
that for me,
it's also like cancer's a turning in on itself. Just want to
okay,
say.
that was another thing I was going to say, back to what Michelle was talking about when it was like, I was thinking about displacement. Like you can be moving, but if you come back to the same point, displacement is zero. Like you've gone nowhere. You've done a lot of work, but you've gone nowhere. And that's what a circle is, right? A lot of work to the same spot. And what is like DNA? It's a helix that is turning and moving upward.
Upward.
And so there's something about like the movement, there has to be a different dimensional movement. It has to be in relation to another thing other than just that flat surface. And so hopefully that all related to what we were just talking about, but those were like stuck in my head. It all is in relation to something else. And we're just, if we're constantly stopping, then we're never connected to the real, to the eternal. Like we'll never see that. That's the big thing that's been sticking out in my head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great.
Oh, good. My golly, there's so much more still. Unfortunately, I'm probably going to have to hop off here, ladies, but I'm thinking that maybe a question we can kind of, I think it's funny how the term ruminate was also something we came up in the chat one time for our Ojiro's conversations, but something that I'm thinking about is just alignment itself. And anyways, it's kind of a question then, like, because obviously to me, the next question is like, well, how do I know I'm in alignment, or how do I get in alignment, right? And or even the fact that that question being presented like that almost reveals a fear of that you won't be able to, that you can't trust that alignment to come forth. But actually, it's quite natural. I think it is actually quite natural. It's almost like we get shifted out of the ease of alignment, and then we're thinking, oh, well, how do I make sure that I get aligned again, or something like that? And maybe there could even be an extreme where somebody's so afraid of being in alignment that they just psych themselves out of the fact that they are aligned or something like that. But there's a lot of questions that opens up for me.
I would say that we know we're in alignment. You talked about relinquishing earlier.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you relinquish, you have to depend on something else. Like you can't just let go. You really have to depend on something that is actually foundational. It's below you. You can't really see it, but you know you're standing on it. Right? That's how I would think about relinquishing. It's a free fall, but knowing that you're going to be carried, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Something's going to get you. It's going to hold you. And you have to be able to, let go, because your grasping is actually more of a hindrance than a help, right?
Yeah.
And I would say for me in my own personal life, that free fall has been onto my intuition. Right?
Mm.
Now, I don't think intuition is everything. I still think that we need to reason. Therefore, we need to take a third person perspective, because I think that's what reason really enables, is when we can get above ourselves and say, okay, what did you do there? And how come, like, where are you? Which is your context. Okay. So you have relinquishing, intuition, context, and then you've got peripheral vision. And peripheral vision is all the information that your subconscious is taking in that is actually acknowledged and known by your body, but not by your mind. Mm-hmm. And that's why I say the body knows a lot. The body is like, when it smells something, it knows what it is, right? When it hears something, it generally, like if it's danger, it can react before the mind even has a chance. A scream, a running, you know. So the body is highly aware, because it's a sensory mechanism, right? It's highly aware of what's going on in the periphery. Um, and there's a little story my sister told me a long time ago. So she works with well, she lives with First Nations, and they did a trip up onto a mountain range that they hadn't been up there for a long time. They go now yearly. And they took the elders with because there's a plant that grows on this mountain range that is only there. And they call them potatoes. And the whole mountain range is called Potato Mountains. But they're just a tuberous plant. And they traditionally used to dig these up, right? So they took the elders up with helicopters because they're so old. And then all the kids, the young people, rode up on horses as they would have traditionally. And the elders showed them how to dig and identify the plants. And this is something that indigenous cultures, even Inuit people, have to teach young people now because they're so distracted away from the periphery that they can't identify, like famously with the Inuit, the kids can't identify snow. They have many, many different words for snow, which indicates, what kind of snow it is, if it's safe to walk on, if it's, all that kind of thing, right? So they take these young people up onto the mountain range, and they're digging. They're showing them, here's the plant. This is what it looks like. This is how you dig it. And this is what the root is, how far down the root is. There's a lot of information, right? And so the kids are working away, and then the elder will walk up to them and say, look around. And the kid starts going like this, and they go, no, 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 look around. The kid has no idea what they're talking about. And what they're talking about is you have to work at that potato plant and you have to be aware of your surroundings. Because what if there's a bear? What if there's, you know, a, some predator sneaking up on you from behind? So you have to sharpen your periphery. When my sister told me that story, I thought, it's possible. People can do it. They can have two eyes. They can focus on a task. And I think mothers really understand this because a mother can be working on something and also have her ear or eye out on the kids. That's periphery, right? So anyway, relinquishing intuition, context, and peripheral vision. That's how I like to live. I'm not always good at it. I try. Yeah.
Sure,
But
you should just write a how-to book on how to live.
no.
Love that. Oh, well,
Yeah.
that's so good. That's so good. I appreciate your guys' time so much. And
Yeah, me
yeah,
too.
I got a lot out of this. I really did. And yeah, I'm very excited about all of my sticky notes. I'm just amassing here on the table.
Well, it was really,
Yeah.
really great to meet you, Megan, and I look forward to more. I mean, there's so many satellite conversations, off of this. I'm gonna have to listen back because I don't even know what we talked about. Like not that I don't know what we talked about, but there's just so much. It was a really good, dense, rich conversation. So I look forward to watching it again.
Yeah, fully agree with all that. And I think I really want to at some point get into that discussion of alignment, like in all the different aspects. I think that's such a interesting. I thought of the body again. I thought of the light again. I thought of refraction, and I was like, oh, I'm like, we could go another few hours talking about that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm
and horseback riding.
inspired. So thank
Mm.
you.
Mhm.
Thank you guys so, so much. And we'll have to do it again. So thank you for your time. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And I have a lot to meditate and reflect on and then integrate. So I'm excited. Thank you both.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Michelle, for
Shari and
hosting.
Megan. Yeah, thank you for being here with me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.